What's up, guys? Thanks so much for clicking on the video. My name is Leah, and let's recap and review Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. This is season 6, episode 9. I was going to do 9 and 10 together, but upon, editing this video, girl, the video is way longer than I thought it was going to be. Like, it's about an hour and some change long. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to have to merge episodes 10 and 11 together. I will tell you this. If you're a Britney apologist or you like Britney, you might not like this review because I don't really feel that bad for Britney. I don't. They're trying to make her like this, like angelic victim, like this wounded bird, and it's not working for me. It is not working for me. But yeah, let's get into this review. All right, y'all. So let's get into episode 9. So it opens up, and the women are still on their yacht trip. We actually see one of the workers setting up a yoga area because there's going to be a yoga session where some of the ladies are going to partake in. So we see Heather and Whitney go get Angie and Brittany because they are the four that are going to be participating in the yoga session. As they're making their way to the deck, Heather is being a complete thirst bucket in the confessional. And when I tell you, I was like, Heather, you need to pick your self-esteem up off the ground because this is embarrassing. It's very embarrassing and cringy. So she's in the confessional saying that, when she thinks of luxury, she does not include like athleisure or like athleticism. She's just like, when I think of luxury, working out ain't it. But she was like, but this yoga session is something I can really get behind. And I'm like, first of all, where did this energy come from? She winking at the camera, and then we find out that the person that's leading the yoga session is Captain Jason. I said, oh, okay. So if she would have just left it there, I wouldn't be talking about what I'm about to talk about now. But the next two lines that she said in her confessional, I said, you need to get your self-esteem up off the ground. Because she's like, if he tells us to bend over, we're gonna bend over. Then she says, I'm hoping he'll warrior 2 all over me. I said, I know at your big age, you did not just say you want this man to give you a creamy facial on national television, Heather. It's one thing to say that in the group chat, because we all got our group chats. It's another thing to say that on national television, and this man has not shown any interest in you. Granted, when the cameras are down, maybe he could be, but he is at least has enough common sense and being very professional enough to know I should not be flirting with her on camera. But you out here talking about you want this man to warrior 2 all over you at your big 50-year-old age. You should be embarrassed. You should be embarrassed, Heather. And if I knew your middle name, I would say your full name right now. Because what are we doing? And this is how I know production don't really care about Heather, even though people always say, well, Heather's always the narrator. Yeah, that don't mean nothing to me. Because if production cared, they would have told you, girl, don't say that. Or they would have edited that out because it made you look like a loser. It made you look like a thirst bucket. Like, girl, what? You want this man to warrior 2 all over you? Ew. So while they're doing the yoga session, you end up hearing Brittany and Heather have a conversation. Heather ends up asking Brittany, girl, how you feeling after what happened between you and Meredith the night before? She says she feels like she got sunburn and whiplash. And she's like, honestly, it's been hard, Heather. Like, that's the answer to the question that you're asking me. She goes on to say that she feels like this trip has been hard because she feels as though people's reactions to her are disproportional. Brittany feels if she does the same exact thing as anybody else on this cast, the reaction to them would not be the same as it is to her. And it's starting to bother her because she feels like it's a power on. The scene then shifts over to Meredith and Lisa in their cabin. And Meredith is still pissed about Brittany bringing up that TikTok of saying that Seth potentially maybe has a mistress and is cheating on her. So Meredith is like, Brittany is disgusting. Like, she thinks she's funny and cute. She thinks she a Disney princess, but she's not. And they show a flashback of Brittany at somebody party twirling and singing and stuff. So she over her. She is definitely over her. She then goes on to say that Brittany's brain aptitude is 1%. Like, she just do not see it for Brittany. Then they bring up the Wizard of Oz. And Meredith ends up saying, like, who is the one that lost their brain? And Lisa confidently literally says, the Tin Man. I said, Lisa, no, it's not. I said, the Scarecrow, if I only had a brain, wanted a brain. The Tin Man wanted a heart, and the lion wanted courage, and Dorothy wanted to get her way back to Kansas. Brittany already got too much heart. You know, y'all remember when she told Jared, I love you. I love you, Jared. Brittany don't need no more heart, okay? And then Meredith starts talking about how she's frustrated and mad at Whitney because she was like, why wouldn't Whitney tell me about this or at least shut Brittany down? Like, that's not what a friend is supposed to do, and she claims that she's my friend. So it goes back to the women doing yoga, and Brittany's like, I brought something up with good intentions, and I said, Brittany, let me stop you right there. Let me stop you right there. You wanted to get Meredith back because she poured that drink in that water in your on your lap. Like, you wanted to get her back because she made you feel small and she embarrassed you. So you wanted to make her feel small and embarrass her. Let's stop with this whole like you had good intentions, because you genuinely did not. I would give you more credit if you would just say, I wanted to get her back because of her pouring the water on me, but I did not expect the reaction that I got at the night of the previous dinner. But then again, Brittany, even that wouldn't suffice, because you were the one that's already saying that Meredith goes from 0 to 100 and she be having seizures or some sort. So it's just kind of like, you already knew what you were dealing with. So why then poke the bear and then get mad when she reacts to you? Either way, stop saying that you had good intentions, because you didn't. So then Heather even says, girl, I don't know how you thought you had good intentions when you're telling this woman at dinner that her husband is potentially cheating on her and you got it from a TikTok. She also tells Brittany, you need to be prepared for Meredith's response to you, because she's going to retaliate and it's going to be big. While they're having this conversation, Whitney is in between them and she's like, y'all are screwing up my zen. Can y'all table this conversation? So then the scene ends there, and then we have this moment of Bronwyn going to Meredith's room. Bronwyn brings Brittany's weirdo unicorn that has Jared's voice in it. And she's like, Meredith, I bring you a gift. And Meredith is like, girl, I don't want that. I don't want that, Bronwyn. You can take it back. So then Bronwyn was like, well, maybe it's a gift / a sacrifice. So I said, what are y'all about to do to this ugly unicorn? So in the cabin, Bronwyn basically is talking to Meredith, and she's like, how are you feeling after what happened between you and Brittany? And Meredith is just like, I'm not worried about somebody with a pea-sized brain. Like, I'm like, really, like, I'm not really worried about her. And so then Bronwyn says, well, I told her, like, you say Meredith overreacts. Like, you can't keep putting yourself in this position. Like, you put yourself there. And I do agree with Bronwyn to an extent that if Brittany is already complaining about how Meredith reacts to stuff, then why are you messing with her? But also, this whole entire situation started because of Bronwyn. Bronwyn wanted to throw a Brittany under the bus to Lisa and Meredith because she wanted to get brownie points with Lisa and Meredith. And then it turned into this. Although Brittany should know that Bronwyn doesn't really like her and she can't be trusted, either way, Bronwyn shouldn't have ran her mouth back to Meredith and Lisa. So she ends up saying, you can't come to this woman with this information and not expect anything. And so Meredith is like, yeah, I'm going to respond. Like, I know how to deal with people who like want to come at me with hate. Like, it is what it is. So I think it was Bronwyn who came up with the idea of like wanting to put Uni somewhere, but then they decide to throw Uni in the ocean. And Bronwyn says, I know this is so evil, but do you think we should do this? And Meredith is like, absolutely. Uni can go swimming overboard. So you see Meredith take the unicorn and is like, you see the water, Uni? You see it? So then Meredith says, I like Uni, but Uni has to go swimming because this is exactly what Brittany deserves. Brittany get on my nerves. Once I found out that Brittany was the oldest on the cast, 54 years old, all the grace that I had for her really left. Because at 54, the way you behave towards your children is deplorable. Okay? And the way you behave in your relationship with Jared is embarrassing and pathetic. So I really don't have that much grace for her anymore. I still like to laugh at Brittany. She's still a kiki to me at times. But I don't really have a lot of grace for her. But that being said, I do not agree with them damaging her property. Like, let that lady have that weirdo unicorn and let her be in peace. So Bronwyn is like, if we're going to do this, we have to be in disguise. So she has her little inflatable outfits, and we actually see them chuck the unicorn into the ocean. I said, why would you want to dirty up the ocean with that? Why? So the women are sitting at the breakfast table, and it's very awkward. like extremely awkward. Whitney decides to break up the awkwardness by asking everyone, like, why is everybody quiet? Is everyone just tired? So no one really says anything. But then she asks Meredith how her toe is. Meredith basically says she probably is going to have to see a doctor once they get off the ship, because this day that, we're seeing them is their last day on the ship. And if you remember when Heather and Meredith met up at the park after Whitney's like winery situation, Meredith let it be known she chipped her tooth that day, as well as she hit her toe so bad that like it was turning purple and blue. So it seems like it's gotten worse. I don't know how they got to this conversation, but basically I feel like maybe either Angie or Bronwyn asked Meredith if she was okay, but she says, I can deal with a lot of things, hatred being thrown my way without a problem. So Brittany chimes in and she's like, I have a hard time with hatred as well. And then Meredith says, like, I don't want to really talk to you. Like, you're somebody that's filled with hate. Brittany is like, who thinks I'm filled with hate? Like, asking a question at the table. And Brittany tries to talk to Meredith, but Meredith's like, girl, I'm done with you. Do not speak to me. I said, oh, okay. She mistakenly calls her Whitney. And then Meredith turns her body, like she has her back towards Brittany, and she's like, honestly, I have an issue with you, Whitney. Like, my issue with you is way bigger than what I have with Brittany from last night. And Whitney is like, what did I do? What did I do? Because she's like, you have an issue with me. And Meredith's like, correct, I have an issue with you. And so Meredith pretty much tells Whitney that she did not like the fact that this whole entire time they've been on this trip, everyone's been talking about how we shouldn't be digging up information on each other. Like, what's the difference between what people say on Twitter and actual headlines? And here you are talking to Brittany about something that happened on Twitter, and instead of bringing it to me, you allow her to do what she did the night before. And they actually flash back to when we see Brittany and Whitney looking at the TikTok. And so Brittany tries to jump in and defend Whitney. But you hear Bronwyn say, girl, let it go. Like, let them like figure this out. While Meredith has her back to Brittany, she keeps like flinging her hair back. And Brittany is like, girl, like getting irritated, okay? So Whitney says, I can clear this up. Like, Brittany, I don't really need your help, because Brittany, again, is still talking, trying to tell Meredith, your issue is with me, not with Whitney. And Meredith is like, girl, I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you. So stop talking to me. And Brittany is like, girl, just be mad at me. Don't be mad at Whitney. So Whitney says, I don't need your help, Brittany. I can clear this up very easily. And she ends up telling Meredith, I told Brittany, either you need to have a conversation with you about this, or we don't acknowledge it and keep it pushing. But she said that she was going to talk to you about it, so that is why I didn't tell you about it. So in the confessional, Whitney is saying that like the TikTok is nothing, but the way in which Meredith is behaving, it's pretty much like, girl, you're making it seem like it's more than what it is. Like, you're pouring gasoline on the fire. And I'm like, Whitney, you're such a hypocrite. Like, you're such a hypocrite, because if TikToks don't matter, and we're judging whether they're have like what credibility to them based off of someone's reaction, then all those TikToks about your jewelry line being from Alibaba and AliExpress and you marking up the prices when you're getting these things by the pallets, you think what those people said about you was true, because you were pissed at Lisa and Meredith last season about that. You even brought this to this season. And so if that's your marker, then what those people said about you is true. Like, girl, are you serious? Like, that's such a hypocritical statement to make when anytime someone brings up TikToks, because even at Lisa's luncheon, her failed luncheon, when Lisa was like, why does everybody on TikTok say this about you? You were like, it's effing TikTok. That's what it is. Oh, you're digging. Like, you got so irate. So if we're judging the credibility of TikToks being based off of people's reactions and Meredith's reaction to this, then what those people have been saying about you is true. And I know you don't want people to think that, so why are you trying to use that as a gotcha moment on Meredith? So while they're sitting there, Brittany ends up saying that she feels like it's a double standard. She was saying something that was meant to be in kindness, and I said, Brittany, no, it wasn't. And that's when you start pissing people off because you're insulting their intelligence. Again, you did that to Meredith because you wanted to get her back for pouring water on you, and that's okay. Own it. But this whole crap about like I did that to be kind is BS, lady. It's straight up BS. So Meredith is like, no, you didn't. You didn't do that. So Brittany starts to mock Meredith, like mimicking her when she's like messing with her hair, like she's like doing this. Meredith gets so pissed off and she's like, don't touch me. And I'm like, but Meredith, you touched her first. Your hair got on her first, so she can do it to you. So then Brittany was like, no, you touched me first. So now Meredith and Brittany are really like getting at it, like they're getting at each other. And Bronwyn is like, don't do that, like trying to calm it down. And everybody is just like, maybe y'all just need to move. I think Whitney ends up asking Meredith, do you want to switch with me? And Meredith's like, yeah, we do need to switch because she disgusts me. I don't like being around people filled with hate. So then Brittany was like, no, you're filled with hate. You go from 0 to 100 in like 2 seconds. And Meredith's like, yes, I do. Yes, I do. And she was like, because I don't like people who are filled with hate. So then Bronwyn is trying to get Brittany to stop. And she's like, stop, I'm trying to help you. But I'm like, girl, Bronwyn, shut up, because you're the reason this popped off, because you were the catalyst for them to start arguing, because you threw Brittany under the bus like several nights ago. So girl, be quiet. So then Meredith basically says, anybody that supports Brittany, I'm done with you. So everyone's like, really, Meredith? And Heather's like, Meredith, are you really serious? And she's like, yeah, I'm done with you. Like, I'm done with you. And then Heather's fixation and obsession with making Lisa the like focal point of all the drama is so weird at this point, because she's in the confessional saying, so then Heather ends up saying, if Meredith can forgive Lisa for digging up stuff about her family, then she can have the spirit of resolution when it comes to Brittany. And I'm like, Heather, what does this have to do with Lisa? Meredith saying that she don't want to deal with that lady is Meredith saying she don't want to deal with it. I get the whole comparison thing, but Lisa ain't said nothing since y'all sat down at this breakfast table. Like, you have an obsession, like a fixation, girl. You need to get help. Okay? So next thing you know, Angie starts to like get in on trying to blame Lisa for this situation, because she brings up Lisa calling Bronwyn gout dick sucker, because she says, I understand, Meredith, we're not supporting Brittany for what she did, but like, if they can get over the whole gout dick sucker thing, then why are we like harping on to this? And Lisa doesn't say anything. And I'm like, Angie, why are you trying to make this about Lisa? This ain't got nothing to do with Lisa. This is Brittany and Meredith beefing. What are we doing? Like, I'm so confused at this point, because I was like, how is this a Lisa problem? So next thing you know, Brittany was like, y'all can just throw me overboard. I can swim. So then Bronwyn is asking Meredith, like, girl, you're a woman of God. You're a pastor. Can you speak to them? And Mary's like, girl, no. She was like, they wouldn't even listen to Jesus or God if he came down and smacked them in the face, because at this point, they all just want to be right. They want to get the last word in and get their point across. She's like, at this point, it's a disaster. It's a disaster. So we see them docking the boat. Everyone starts to go and get their luggage. Brittany is looking for Uni, and she can't find her unicorn. We find out that because Bronwyn came late on the trip, she's going to be on a different flight than them. So she's excited because she's tired and over everybody at this point. So the women get off of the ship. They hug the crew. I hope whatever they gave them as a tip was very hefty for everybody involved, because all that yelling and screaming they did was too much. It was too much. So the women are making their way to like get on the Sprinter to head to the airport, and Daisy comes out with the unicorn. So I guess they fished it out of the ocean, and Brittany was like, where did you find it? And why is it wet? And Daisy's like, it was in the ocean. You hear the chef guy, I think his name is Ben, he ends up saying, girl, just put it in some rice and call it a day. I was like, oh, he tired of y'all. He is so tired of y'all. So Brittany is going around in the group asking everybody, like, who threw my unicorn in the ocean? Everyone's like, girl, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. But then you can tell that Meredith and Bronwyn are the culprits because Meredith is just sitting there very quiet, but she has a smirk on her face. Bronwyn admits that she did it. She was like, it was just a joke. It was just gonna be funny for you to laugh at. I said, Bronwyn, how was it gonna be funny for her to laugh at when you said in the cabin that you knew what y'all were doing was evil? People don't laugh at evilness unless they're evil. So I'm just like, girl, and Brahman is doing what Brittany is doing. Brittany talking about, she brought up that TikTok about Seth potentially having a mistress as a kind gesture with good intentions. Bull, you know what. And what Brahman is doing right now is the same thing Brittany was doing. Girl, you meant that to be mean. It wasn't meant to be funny. You wanted to hurt the lady's feelings and you succeeded. Because now she's in the confessional feeling some type of way. So Meredith admits, she was like, yeah, we did it. Uni looked like it needed to swim. It had mascara and all that on it. And so Braun was like, we thought you would get a laugh out of it. Whitney is like, girl, why would she laugh at that? And I agree with Whitney. She was like, really? And you could tell that Brittany is upset because she was like, why would you ruin a gift for me? Like, Jared, he really went to great lengths to get me that gift. I said, girl, he went to Build-A-Bear and probably spent maybe $40 because I'm pretty sure that skin of the unicorn was probably $35. So let's say $50, and then putting the voice recording in there and them sewing it up. He didn't even put clothes on the unicorn. Girl, he didn't spend that much money on that. Calm down, Brittany. But she's upset. She walks away in a huff. Meredith is laughing, and that's where it ends with them getting to the airport and going home. So let's talk about this plane flight. Okay. So we don't have any footage, which I think is very annoying, and I don't understand why they made this a storyline unless they have the footage and potentially will show it during the reunion. But not showing it during the season is irritating because it's like, we're playing Scooby-Doo mysteries and I don't like it, okay? But let's get into it. So we're getting this story told by everybody's perspective of what they saw or what they experienced, all right? So Heather basically says Meredith was completely out of her mind when they were at the airport. So pretty much sitting at the gate and going through TSA. Angie co-signs what Heather is saying by saying that it was very uncomfortable and Meredith was yelling, screaming, and crying all because she was upset about Brittany talking about her marriage. They flash back to when they had the zombie party and Brittany brings up what she saw on TikTok about Seth, and then Meredith calls Brittany a liar. So Angie says Meredith was making a scene. It was a lot. So we find out that Brittany was the last person in the group to get on the plane, and her seat was right in front of Meredith and Lisa. So they then start showing text messages, and I'm guessing it was of group chats or basically text messages to different people at different times. So you have Meredith texting Heather, I'm livid, and Heather saying, what happened? So Heather was asleep. Because Heather says she slipped off into sleep, and then she was awoken by the argument or the situation that was going on between Brittany and Meredith. So Heather basically says she woke up to Meredith raging and making a scene. So by this time, they're actually in the air when all of this is going down. So she was like, Meredith was unhinged. Mary ends up saying that Meredith kept reliving what Brittany did. And she was getting more upset as she kept thinking about it. And she kept dwelling on it. And Mary was like, she just could not come back from getting out of that mode. So then you see Whitney texting, I don't know who, but she says Meredith is behind her, taunting her. She is effing unhinged. So everyone was like, this kept going on for several hours. Meredith was spiraling. So Whitney's in her confessional saying she was speaking very loudly about Brittany the entire flight, and all of first class could hear what Meredith was saying. So Brittany ends up saying that there was some grabbing of her chair, somebody shook the back of her chair. She also said it was someone was banging the back, kicking it, boom, boom, boom. She goes on to say that there was a splash of her wine, and there was hair pulling behind her. She continues on by saying that it was something she never experienced before. Whitney chimes in her confessional saying they really wanted her phone. Lisa and Meredith really wanted her phone, and they were like, "We want your phone. Show us the TikTok." And so Lisa said she grabbed the armrest and told Brittany, "Girl, just give her the effing phone. Just show her the effing TikTok, Brittany, and it'll be fine." So Lisa said, then she sat back and let it go. Brittany says she put on her headphones, but she could still hear Meredith raging out and being upset. So then you see a conversation through text messages between Whitney and Heather, where Whitney says they have been taunting Brittany the entire flight. Heather responds by saying they are being very mad. And then they're all like, she's yelling. Basically, Meredith is yelling at Brittany. So then Whitney responds by saying, "I don't want to fly with these bitches," referring to Meredith and Lisa. So then Meredith ends up saying what happened was very simple in her confessional. She says she vented to Lisa about Brittany. She says she never engaged with Brittany. And she's like, let's be clear. She never spoke to Brittany. She never touched Brittany. Meredith is making it very plain and simple. Girl, I ain't touch her. I ain't speak to her. Okay? I was just venting to Lisa. So Brittany says after a while, it got too much and she started bawling her eyes out. She's like, she's never in her life been treated that way. And Meredith says, as they were landing, Lisa woke up. And once Lisa woke up, they started talking about Brittany again. And Meredith says she spoke to her for like 10 minutes and that's it. Angie's in her confessional saying Brittany just melted once we landed. She just melted into a puddle of tears and we were all trying to get her together. Meredith says there wasn't any screaming. And then Angie, we see a text message from Angie where she says, "Can you hear what they're saying?" And Brittany ends up saying it was horrible and it was so humiliating. They end up showing Crazy Rich Asians on the back of a plane screen. And at first I was like, why are y'all showing us this? But then once you get to episode 11, you understand why. You hear Whitney say Meredith was completely unhinged. And then Meredith says in her confessional, "I would have been arrested by the air marshal if what they're saying is true about what took place." And that didn't happen. So the screen goes black, and then when it opens up, we're in Utah, and it's been 2 days since the ladies got off the plane. This is how I feel about it. I definitely think something went down between Meredith and Brittany. We've seen Meredith go from 0 to 100. Like, we've seen her do it. But I also feel like if Meredith was pulling that lady's hair, she poured a drink on her, or was like shaking the chair, and Lisa was a part of it, I do believe that they would be reprimanded. Meredith and Lisa are not that famous where like a stewardess wouldn't be like, "We need to move you," or "Do we need to strap you to the chair?" And I do believe if it was that bad, they would have had the air marshals waiting for them when they got off the plane. It was a commercial flight. It wasn't a private jet. Now, I've seen a lot of people make arguments about, oh, production was sitting with them. No one gives an FUCK about who producers are. These people aren't famous. So that doesn't track for me. I definitely think that Meredith was probably talking very loudly about Brittany and she wanted Brittany to hear her. But I do not believe that she was shaking that lady's chair or she was grabbing her hair or pouring wine on her. I also think it's really weird that on a commercial flight, nobody pulled out their phone. Like, nobody was on that flight with you guys and there's no video footage of what went down. Like, none. That's weird to me. So either they're going to show it to us or at the reunion or something, because the other part that makes me feel like it's not that big of a deal is there was a rumor going around that production actually put Meredith on pause, and that's when all those rumors about Meredith potentially being fired from the show started to come out. But the fact that they let Meredith film till the end of the season makes me feel like whatever those women were saying was not true. Like, it wasn't as deep as they were making it seem. Yes, Meredith was probably being irate and loud and being disrespectful, but I do not think she touched Brittany, because I also feel like it's weird in episode 11, Brittany, like, accepted her apology. She didn't even give Meredith any pushback. And I'm like, girl, if someone actually was pulling my hair, spilled a drink on me, was shaking my chair, the apology Meredith gave in episode 11 would not be good enough for me. Like, it wouldn't. On top of that, if it was that bad, why didn't anybody, like, move? Why didn't nobody move? Why didn't the people in production not move Brittany to another seat? Like, no. This don't sound right to me. And when things don't sound right, Normally something ain't right. So no, I'm not buying it. So it's been 2 days since the ladies have gotten back from their trip. And we see everyone still reeling from the plane ride from hell. So you have Mary and Bronwyn meeting up. Mary's getting Bronwyn up to speed about what went down. She basically tells Bronwyn, girl, you were so smart for not riding back with us, like for not flying back with us. And Bronwyn is like, girl, what went down? Like, was it that bad? Mary's like, pure chaos, girl. It was pure chaos. Do you hear me? And Bronwyn was like, are you serious? Like, for real? And Mary's like, yeah, girl. She basically says that from the time they boarded the plane to the time that everybody sat down in their seats, Meredith had been starting with Brittany. And Mary is like, I have my issues with Brittany. And Bronwyn was like, me too. But she was like, at the end of the day, right is right and wrong is wrong. So then we see Whitney and Justin having a conversation about what went down on the plane. Whitney is like, Meredith lost her mind. Lisa was egging it on, like pouring gasoline on the fire, basically telling Brittany, you effed up, you owe Meredith an apology. Justin was like, Lisa was telling Brittany this, and Whitney's like, yes. She then goes on to say, they were telling me to give my phone to them because they wanted to see the TikTok. And he's like, wow. So then we see Lisa and John in their car. Girl, Lisa gonna plug her Wendy's brand deal. I said, come on, girl, with the chicken nuggets and the fries and a Coke, okay? And they're in the car, and Lisa pretty much says, look, we got on the plane and Meredith lost her mind. She was like, I love her so much. And I could understand why she was upset, but she was speaking very loudly. John gonna ask, so was she speaking loud enough so Brittany could hear her? Lisa's response to that is like, well, I've never seen Meredith that upset, and I don't know. Girl, you know Lisa, you know Meredith was speaking that loud so Brittany could hear her, okay? So that does confirm that Lisa, like that Meredith was loud, but that does not confirm if Meredith actually put her hands on Brittany. Because what do you mean she was pulling that lady's hair, shaking her chair aggressively to the point where wine got spilled on her, or she purposely spilled her wine on her, and nobody from production got up and forced them to switch seats, or none of the stewardess tried to move Brittany to a different seat. That don't sound right. It don't sound right to me. Okay, they were on a commercial flight and nobody got footage. Don't sound right. So Lisa was just like, everything was just really, really crazy. So we actually see Heather meet up with Brittany. And when I tell you the dramatics was dramaticking, okay? I don't really feel that bad for Brittany. Now, do I think it's okay for people to put their hands on people? No. No, unless you are defending yourself, like you should not be, you're an adult. You should not put your hands on somebody. But I also feel like they don't really care about Brittany. And when I say they, I'm talking about Bronwyn, Whitney, Heather, and Angie. Like, by the time I got to episode 11, I was like, y'all are only using her as a means to get to Lisa and Meredith. Like, y'all don't really care about her, because if you did, you would be mad at Mary for not inviting her to church. You would also be mad at Mary, which we're going to talk about in episode 10, for not actually putting in effort to leave Brittany a sweet message in that bear. Like, it just shows that y'all don't really care. She's just a pawn that y'all are using. So this whole moment, I was like, I had my tinfoil hat on, especially when it got to the point where Brittany says they pulled her hair. And I said, and you didn't punch that lady in her shit? Like, I'm not trying to advocate for violence, and I'm not a violent person. I'm very like non-confrontational. But if I am sitting on a plane and you yank the back of my head, I'm dead in your face. Just, cause what you mean you grabbing my hair? What? You touch my body. It's a problem. Defend yourself. So now I'm like, Brittany, did you just sit there and allow them to do that to you so you could be a victim? Cause I believe Brittany would do something like that. So I'm like, it don't sound right to me. Okay. So Heather and Brittany are meeting up. Brittany gets to the restaurant. Heather's like, oh my gosh, I kept checking my phone. I wasn't sure if you were going to come. I thought you were going to cancel. So they embrace. They're hugging onto each other and holding onto each other tightly. And so Heather's like, are you okay? That sounds crazy to ask you, but are you okay? And then Brittany ends up saying she doesn't even know how to answer that. She goes on to say that she hasn't really eaten or slept since, the trip. So then Heather says, this is not how any trip should end. And she also says there isn't no justification for the way that Brittany was treated. So Brittany ends up saying, like, this is very hard to talk about. Like, I feel the trauma in my body. I said, okay, girl. And she says, I feel like I've been hit by a truck. Heather then goes on to say that she saw that Lisa and Meredith were sitting near each other, and she feels like they have this vortex around each other where it causes them to bully people. And it is so interesting to see how fixated Heather is on Lisa and Meredith's relationship. Like, she has been bothered by the fact that you start off the season with saying that Meredith did not stick up for Lisa, trying to wedge an issue in between them. Then you're mad at Meredith for believing that Lisa did not dig up stuff about her family, or just accepting that it happened and moving on, to now you're saying that when they're around each other, there's this vortex of bullying. And the crazy thing about it is, as much as the group does not want them to be friends, because since last season, Whitney, Angie, the two of them have been trying to break up Lisa and Meredith. Now you add Heather into it, and it's like y'all are trying to break the brunettes apart, but they not letting up. And I don't get why it bothers them so much that they are friends. Like, I'm thinking back to like the first couple of, well, I mean, we're still in the first couple of seasons, but I'm trying to think about like season 1, 2, 3. It's like Lisa and Meredith were a duo, but they weren't like a formidable one. So I don't get the purpose of them trying to split them apart. It's weird to me, but they really don't like them together. And Heather has like this fixation on blaming Lisa for everything, and also wanting her to be isolated in this group where it's like she only wants to be Lisa's friend. It's weird. It's like you want to take her down, but then you also want her to like need you at the set. It's weird. It's weird, y'all. It's weird. So Heather admits that she thought eventually that Lisa and Meredith would settle down, so she fell asleep. But then she kind of woke up out of a haze. Brittany says, you know what, Heather, I almost literally woke you up. And Heather was like, you should have. Brittany says it went on for like a couple of hours, like for 4 hours. She says they pulled her hair, and then I think this is when Heather ends up saying, what happened when Meredith went to the bathroom? Brittany says she grabbed the back of my seat and she shook it. She shook it and she was like, this one right here, this one right here. And Heather says, when she woke up, she kind of woke up in a haze. And then she was like, I heard Lisa saying, you effed up, you effed up. And Brittany is like, oh, so you heard her say that to me. And Heather says, I told them to like leave you alone. But then Heather basically says that Lisa and Meredith came at her like full force. So in the confessional, Brittany basically says that she felt very small in that moment, and she was really disappointed in herself because she eventually felt like the women broke her. And again, I think it's weird that you at 54 years old allowed somebody to allegedly pull your hair and you did not turn around and pop her in her face. What, like at that point, you were well within your right to get violent on that plane. I mean, I drag her up and down the aisle. You grabbing people's hair, and you didn't do like that's weird. Like I'm sorry, like I know I'm harping on this, but that is weird to me. You're not gonna grab my hair and I not hit you. It sounds like you. Let me let it go. I'm gonna let it go. So she ends up saying that the stewardess kept checking up on her, saying, Miss Bateman, are you okay? Are you okay? And Brittany was like, I just said, can I get some water? And I'm like, the stewardess didn't find a seat for you to move to? Okay. And so then Brittany says she can't believe that Lisa turned on her like that. And she was like, I've truly defended her and had her back. So Brittany is in the confessional saying, like, I've defended Lisa when she wasn't even around. They flash back to episode 1, where when they were on their way to Provost Canyon, Brittany was defending Lisa against Whitney. You did it that one time, girl. And granted, that's great and all, but we've seen you egg on things with Lisa. So I'm like, okay, Brittany, I'll let you have that one. So she says that Lisa also was a part of the kicking of her seat and, like, shaking of her chair. She says that what hurts the most is that Lisa turned on her. That hurts more than what Meredith did to her. And she also hates the fact that Lisa egged it on. She says it's the ultimate betrayal. I said, okay, girl. So she feels like Lisa is just as culpable as Meredith. All right. And so she says, normally I feel like I'm she said, indestructible rubber ducky, but like they really broke me. So then Heather ends up saying, you deserve support. You deserve dignity. You deserve, everything that makes you feel safe, and the women owe you an apology, and this is not what friendship is, and these women don't deserve our friendship or don't deserve being in this group if they're going to behave that way. So now Heather's talking about how she feels guilty for bringing Brittany into this group, and this changed her opinion about Meredith and Lisa. But I'm like, aren't you the same person that said last year that you were embarrassed at the fact that you brought Brittany into this group, that you were ashamed that you were friends with her? So now all of a sudden you feel bad about, okay, because on that boat you did nothing for Brittany as Meredith got in her ass. But now all of a sudden it's a problem. Okay. So then Heather basically tells Brittany, if I ever told the line between what's right and what's wrong, I'm never going to do that again. You have my 100% support. I'm going to be here for you. And I'm so sorry this happened to you. And then they like hold hands. So the next thing we have is with Bronwyn and Whitney. Bronwyn wants all the tea about what went down on that plane flight. She's just like, girl, I haven't seen anybody from the trip other than Mary, but I've been hearing all these things like what happened. Whitney's like, girl, you miss a plane flight from hell. And she was like, well, what did Mary tell you? And Bronwyn was like, Mary told me that Meredith freaked out. She freaked out and that she had been going at Brittany for hours. So then they flash back to when Mary and Bronwyn had a conversation, and Mary is just like, Meredith like went off on Brittany. She was like tormenting her the entire time that they were on the flight. Lisa didn't stop her, and they were sitting next to each other. She goes on to say that Meredith wanted me to be mad at Brittany. She wanted me to be livid with Brittany, and it was just a lie. So then Bronwyn was like, she complained the entire flight, and Mary's like, yes, girl, the entire flight. She was on one, okay? So then Whitney ends up saying, yeah, Meredith was completely unhinged. She was like, she was terrorizing and tormenting Brittany to the point where Brittany was a puddle of tears and started hyperventilating. And she was like, Lisa was also yelling at Brittany saying, you effed up, you effed up. She goes on to say that she doesn't know like what was fueling Meredith. She was like, I don't know if it was alcohol or sleeping pills, but all I know is that it was pure rage. So then Bronwyn basically says, there's just no way that all of this stuff that Whitney is telling me went down on that plane, and Meredith wasn't like zip tied. There was no footage of the behavior, because this is all taking place on a commercial flight. She was like when y'all landed, TSA or the actual like police were not waiting for Meredith. She wasn't put on the permanent no-fly list. Like, the fact that there was no video is very perplexing to me. She also says, if I would have been on that plane, I would have gave you a video. I would have took a video. And I said, thank you for your services, Bronwyn, because I believe you. We would have thanked you for that, because this doesn't make any sense. I will say, I knew what Whitney was doing when she made that statement saying she doesn't know what was fueling Meredith, whether it was pills or alcohol. And she proved to me that I was correct, because when on episode 11, she brings up her drug addict daddy, saying that Meredith's behavior makes her feel uncomfortable because it reminds her of that drug addict of a father. I said, that's nasty, Whitney. That is nasty, because people are going to take what you're saying as more weight because you have experiences with a parent that's a drug addict. That ain't right. I don't. And my thing is, Meredith could be on drugs. She could be an alcoholic, but who are you? You're not a safe space to call anybody out about that. But I was just like, oh, I know what you about to do. I was like, oh, you are like, when I tell you Whitney is so predictable, and and she confirmed it to me, because I said, girl, you really I knew it, y'all. In my mind, I said, they're going to try to start making a storyline that Meredith was on something. And I was like, I know Whitney going to bring up her daddy. And then she did it in episode 11. And I said, that's nasty. That is nasty, Whitney. So then Bronwyn basically says, well, maybe both Todd and Meredith need to have a refresher course on plane etiquette. And so Whitney is like, what do you mean? Like, she's looking at her like, what do you mean? So pretty much Bronwyn said when she got back from the trip, she gets onto Twitter and there's like a thread about people accusing Todd of potentially like cheating on her because somebody was sitting beside him or behind him on a plane. I think the flight was either going from Salt Lake City to New York or New York back to Salt Lake City. But pretty much he was looking at women in lingerie. And Whitney was like, do you believe what these people are saying? And Bronwyn was like, yes, I do, because they were on the same flight and they knew where he was sitting. And so they flash across the screen, what's it called? A tweet from All About the Truth. And it says, Todd Bradley was spotted on his flight looking at women who were not his wife. Then I think this is like an Instagram post, was like, sat behind Todd Bradley on a flight from Salt Lake City to JFK. Todd was looking at photos and texts of mystery women in lingerie. So she was upset. Bronwyn was like, she was upset. And so Whitney is like, oh, I'm so sorry, like, this is happening. So Bronwyn basically tells us that when Todd got back home, he was supposed to be going on another flight out, and she pretty much kicked him out of the house and told him, go to the hotel and, we need space and we can figure this out when you get back. In the confessional, she tried to like make it cute, but then she was like, no, I told him you need to go. At first, Todd tried to deny it and pretty much blame it on the ladies by saying, well, why don't you ask your friends about this? This seems like their dirty work to put that type of story out there. But then Bronwyn was like, no, girl, I believe it. I think it's actually true. So this is when Bronwyn brings up how she would love, like, this wouldn't have bothered her if her and Todd had an arrangement and he talked to her about it. And Whitney was looking at her like, girl, what? What are you talking about? And Bronwyn was like, I would be okay with trying things with Todd if we would just communicate. She's like, I don't want to be done with Todd. I want to evolve with Todd, and I need him to evolve with me, and I need him to be open. So she was like, I would love for when Lisa brings up that he's making out with somebody, I can say, well, of course I know about this because I picked her. And the way Whitney looked at her like, girl, okay. So then Bronwyn says she felt very comfortable talking to Whitney about this because they are similar in age. I think Whitney is 39, Bronwyn is 40. And so Whitney basically is like, we are similar in the sense that our husbands are a lot older than us. Like, Whitney has been married to Justin for 15 years. Bronwyn has been married to Todd for 17 years. And she says, there have been moments in my marriage where I thought I was done with Justin. But then we went to therapy and we realized that we wanted to be back together. But when we thought we were done, we both were out there in the fields looking and dating other people. But now we do have this arrangement because we have friends who live different lifestyles, and they communicated to us how they go about their arrangements. And she was like, we don't have an open marriage. Marriage is sacred. But pretty much it sounds like they're allowed to do things with other people as long as they communicate with each other about it. And I believe that's what Justin and Whitney do. I also believe that Whitney is attracted to Justin and still wants to be married to Justin. Bronwyn, I don't believe. I feel like Bronwyn just does not want to let go of Todd because she has anxious style attachment issues, and she basically married her mother because Todd acts like Muzzy. Just a slightly nicer version of Muzzy. And it's weird to me because it didn't feel authentic. Whitney, yes. Bronwyn, no. And I'm just like, girl, you need to stand up, because it's starting to feel like even though she does not have a prenup with Todd, she don't really got it the way she thinks she do. Or maybe she's afraid that she won't be able to live the lifestyle that she has. But like, Bronwyn just wasn't convincing to me. It just sounds like because she don't want to leave him, she gonna let that man cheat in peace. And this is her way of letting him cheat in peace. Because I was like, this don't sound right. It doesn't. So the next scene we have is with Angie and Electra. We find out that Electra is getting ready to go on a horse competition, and they're having a conversation about being Greek. Angie's like, look at my shirt. And it was a Greek flag on her shirt. And Electra was like, okay, girl, whatever. She was like, your sport is so cool. And I was thinking that in the Olympics, maybe you could like sign up to represent Greece. Electra says, girl, that's a bad idea. I'm not doing that. She was like, why would I represent Greece when, I was born in the United States? That doesn't make sense to me. She ends up saying, like, her grandfather, I think they call him Papu. She was like, Papu didn't immigrate from Greece in order for me to represent Greece. So then Angie tries to express to her and really stress to her the importance of knowing your roots and your heritage. She knows a lot about her father's life and about his family, but she doesn't know a lot about her mother's. And she was like, I don't want you to feel like how I feel as an adult now trying to figure out that other half of me. So I want you to be invested in being Greek, because I don't think Sean is Greek, but she's like, she relates more to Sean's family because we find out that Sean's family are a family of like horse riders and ranchers. So she was like, they're into the same things that I'm into. And I don't know. I often wonder, did Angie just started doing this whole Greek thing, or has she always been like this? Because Electra is like, it's Greek everything. Greek this, Greek mugs, Greek that. I got to go to church and be Greek. I got to dance and be Greek. So I can understand her frustrations of like, this feels overwhelming. But I do think it's important that she understands and knows her culture. Like, yeah, girl, you live in Utah, but you Greek. Learn about being Greek. But I think the way in which Angie goes about it does not make it fun for Electra. So she's just kind of like, this a lot, But maybe when she gets older, she'll grow out of it and she'll start to realize and understand the importance of what her mom is doing. But I do think that Angie might need to pull back just a little bit, because it kind of does feel like Angie makes being Greek her whole entire personality, and not in a good way. It kind of feels like overcompensation instead of just being like who you are. Like, I'm black. I don't overcompensate for being black. Girl, I'm me. I'm a black Southern girl from the suburbs. Like, that's who Leah is. I don't feel the need to overcompensate. So I think that is what Electra is turned off by, is the overcompensation that Angie does. It's like, girl, at some point you got to reel it in. And maybe Electra will come around. I hope she does, because I do think it is important for her to know her heritage and her history. So the next thing we have is of Lisa and Heather. They meet up at this restaurant. Mind you, Lisa is an hour and 30 minutes late. Heather got there at 11:10, and then Lisa got there at basically 12:30. Didn't even apologize when she sat down. She just sat down and said, hey, girl. And I said, Lisa, that's rude. You should have apologized. So it's awkward, but Lisa kicks off the conversation basically saying it was a lot. Like, it's been a lot since we've all seen each other. She also says, obviously, Meredith was upset and she was trying to calm Meredith down and soothe her, but it wasn't working. Heather basically says that she had a conversation with Brittany, and Brittany does not want to be around her or Meredith. And Lisa's like, girl, what did I do to her? I ain't do nothing to her. Why wouldn't she want to be around me? She was like, all I said was, girl, send her the freaking TikTok so we can move on from this. And Heather's like, no, Lisa, you kept saying you effed up, you effed up, you effed up. And Lisa's like, no, I just said send her the TikTok. Like, send her to TikTok. And she was like, Meredith had been freaking out since we went through like customs and like TSA, and I was trying to calm her down, but it wasn't working. So then Heather's like, no, Brittany said that you were egging on Meredith and you were also antagonizing her. And so Lisa's in her confessional saying, why is Heather trying to lump me into this? Like, you're not my God, you're not my jury, you're not my judge. Like, girl, what's up with you? And I'm with Lisa. Heather does try to position herself in this group like she's like the moral compass. But after you get punched in the face and lie about it for 2 years, you are not the moral compass. You actively cannot be that, because you blatantly lied for basically 2 years about who assaulted you, lady. Like, you could never question me if I was on this cast about if I'm telling the truth or not, because I would always bring up, Heather, didn't you get punched in the face and lie about it for 2 years? Oh, okay, shut up. Get out my face. That would be me every time Heather tried to check me. So Lisa basically says, first of all, Meredith was the one yelling at me. And honestly, I feel like what Lisa is saying is more so the truth. Again, I do believe Meredith lost her sugar honey iced tea. I do. I believe she was yelling, but all this stuff about pulling Brittany's hair, pouring a drink on her, shaking her chair, I do not believe that, because I don't understand. Because Heather told us on Watch What Happens Live that 90% of first class was production and the ladies. Why didn't anybody on production or any of the women choose to move Brittany? Like, be like, hey, take my seat. None of y'all did that. makes me feel like Meredith was being loud, but she was yelling at Lisa about how pissed off she was at Brittany. Okay. And so she was like, Lisa goes on to say, I put my hand on Brittany's armrest and I said, hey girl, just send the effing TikTok. Just send it so we can move on with this. Lisa also brings up a good question. If this was that bad, why didn't any of y'all step in? Heather says, I did step in. I was sound asleep until the very end. So I was like, were you sound asleep until the very end, or did you step in, Heather? Because you talking out of both sides of your neck. Because one minute you're saying you're asleep, the next minute you're saying you were awake and you saw everything. You didn't see everything. You may have saw bits and pieces, but you did not see everything. So then Heather brings up how it took 4 of the ladies to get Brittany off the plane and help her regroup and all of that stuff. And she was like, well, why didn't you help us in customs with Brittany? Lisa says, girl, I was protecting my peace. I ain't want to do all of that with y'all no more. I didn't want to do all that. So then Lisa says, basically was like, I didn't want to help any of y'all. And she's also like, I don't know why you're trying to put this on me, because I didn't have anything to do with this. And so then Heather's like, I'm talking to you as a friend, Lisa. And Lisa's like, girl, and I'm talking to you as a friend, Heather. And next thing you know, Lisa says, I feel bad that Brittany is upset about what happened, but could she at least take some responsibility for how this situation transpired? So then Heather basically says, it sounds like you're saying she deserved it, Lisa. And Lisa's like, I did not say she deserved that, but I'm with Lisa. We're not going to act like Meredith is some raging like bear that just attacked Brittany. Meredith had a reason to be upset with Brittany. Did she go about it in the wrong way? Yes. But to act like Brittany was just some wounded lamb in the woods that like, no, we're not. She's not a victim. I'm not going with that. I'm not going with that. Again, I do not think it's okay if Meredith did put her hands on Brittany. That's not okay. That's not okay. If wine got spilled on her, that's not okay. If she shook her chair, that's not okay. If the lady was talking badly about her, look, so be it. But I'm not going to sit here and act like Brittany didn't cause all of this. Like, girl, you should have never brought up that TikTok if you were not prepared for her to be raging out on you. That's just how I feel right now. Like, girl. So Heather's like, stuff got splashed onto Brittany. Like, y'all were moving her chair. And then Lisa was like, girl, I got wet. Because Meredith had her hand like this as she was yelling. And I got wet with some wine on it. So then Heather ends up saying, y'all were bullying, harassing her. And Lisa was like, girl, don't put that statement on me because I don't agree with that. And then Heather's like, I'm telling you how Brittany felt. No, you're putting extra sauce on this, girl, because you're using this as a point to get at Lisa because you don't like her right now. So then they start talking about Meredith potentially shaking Brittany's chair. And Lisa's like, Meredith only pulled on the back of Brittany's chair so she could get up and go to the bathroom. That's it. She was like, she was talking with her hands and there was wine in her glass, like her cup, and some of it got on me. And then Heather was like, but no, it got on Brittany too. And Lisa was like, no, girl, it just got on me. It didn't get on Brittany too. So they start going back and forth. And Lisa's just kind of like, girl, how do you know all of this went down? Like, you were asleep, Heather. You were asleep. And Heather's starting to get upset with Lisa because she's like, don't try to tell me what I saw. And Lisa's like, well, no, you were asleep. And also, I don't like the fact that y'all were all telling me to get control of Meredith. She was like, I don't have control over Meredith. Meredith's a grown adult. Like, I don't know what you want me to do, Heather. And so when the plane landed, they were all like, Lisa, why didn't you diffuse the situation? Like, you weren't trying to help. And Lisa was like, girl, I don't agree with what you're saying. Like, I don't agree. And I don't agree with what Brittany's saying. And I'm not about to sit here and take ownership for something that I didn't do. She was like, it is what it is. She was like, I'm not going to be held responsible for what Meredith did. So then Heather ends up saying, like, this lady is saying straight to my face that she did nothing wrong. Like, but I witnessed what she did. And I was like, did you really, Heather, if you were asleep most of the time? And so Lisa ends up saying, I do think Brittany needs to take accountability for her part in this. Heather ends up saying like she doesn't. Like Brittany has no accountability in this. And then Lisa gets really upset and she was like, y'all not about to put all of this on me like I did something. She was like, this feels like an accusatory conversation. It does not feel like a conversation amongst friends. And so Heather's like, you're getting defensive. And Lisa's like, no, I'm pointing out this situation. So then Heather says, this was a horrible situation. This is a crisis and this is a problem. So Lisa is like, I don't understand why Heather is trying to put all of this like on me. Like, I agree with Meredith. Like, Brittany was trying to hurt her family and hurt her. And at this point, this is mental because y'all been doing this for years. She then messes up another like childhood story where she meant to say Alice in Wonderland, but she references Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, talking about Oompa Loompa Land and everything being crazy. And she's in Cuckoo Town waiting for somebody to come out with chocolate. So then Heather ends up saying, Lisa, you did come at me. You were calling me an effing B and you were telling me all this stuff. And Lisa was like, I didn't do that. And she's like, yes, you did. You can leave, Lisa. So Lisa's like, no, you can leave. You can leave. Like, I'm going to sit here and finish my drink. And so Heather's in her confessional saying, this is what made it so hard for me and Lisa to be friends because she's trying to change my reality. And I know what I saw. And Lisa's like, girl, I'm not going to sit here and agree to something that I didn't do. She was like, I feel bad that Brittany feels that way, but I've been a good friend to Brittany, and it is what it is. I don't agree with what y'all are saying. And I said, well, there you have this sit down with Mary and Meredith. And what this boiled down to me is that Meredith does not, I don't think she completely remembers what she did, but I think she remembers like bits and pieces of it because she ends up trying to gaslight Mary, but you can tell that Mary was actually like concerned because she was like, Meredith, I don't think you really remember everything that went down. And that's concerning. And Meredith feels like Mary has been listening to Whitney because the way that the seats were set up, she was like, she does not believe that Mary saw everything. So they actually show us how the seats were set up. Angie was all the way at the front of the plane in the first row. The fourth and fifth row is where everybody else was sitting. So you had Mary near the window, then Whitney in the aisle. Brittany was also in the aisle. And then you had Heather in the aisle, and then Lisa and Meredith were sitting next to each other. I'm like, well, why didn't Whitney get up or why didn't Angie get up? So she wasn't near the two of them. Again, ugh. But you could tell that Mary was actually concerned for Meredith because Meredith was like, I only said something for 15 minutes. And Mary was like, no, girl, it was longer than that. And so then Meredith's like, okay, 30 minutes. But like, I went to sleep. I watched 2 movies. Like, what else? And Mary was like, no, girl, it was longer than that. She was like, no, Meredith, like, it was longer than that. And that leads me to believe that Meredith doesn't really remember everything. Like, she might remember like bits and pieces of what went down, but I could see Meredith raging out for at least a couple of hours and then tiring herself out and going to sleep and then waking back up angry again. I could see it. But yeah, y'all, this was way longer than I expected. Please be on the lookout for episodes 10 and 11. I'm probably going to merge those reviews because this was supposed to be episode 9 and 10 together, but it's already an hour long. So we ain't got time for all of that, all right? But as always, remember to be bravely authentic. Definitely hop down in the comments below and subscribe to the channel. And I'm out, y'all. Deuces.